Well, hello and welcome to episode 388 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. How are you? Thank you very much for joining us today. I say us, I have two great guests today. It's Friday, so I've got Finnegan Fridays. Comedian Christian Finnegan joins us to talk to me about the week and all kinds of other cultural things. As always, love talking with him. And for the first time on the podcast, my old friend from SiriusXM, Julie Mason, joins me. We had a really wonderful conversation, and I'm very happy to share both of those with you. Had a great time last night hanging out with listeners and subscribers of this show, the stand-up community, as we like to call it. A lot of new people joining us for the first time, having a good time. My old man stopped by, Chisel D, Chuck Dominic, my dad and my mom was in the background. Comedian J.L. Covan was there. We told a lot of private stories, and it was great. John Carroll stopped by. So many of our favorite folks were hanging out. We had a great time, a lot of laughs. Everybody busted my balls, as always, and it was great. I hope to have you join one of those if you haven't already. If you haven't signed up for a subscription, you're missing out. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic or the paid subscription link in the show notes and sign up now. On Fridays, I don't do the news because I have the Hangouts on Thursday night, so I've got two great guests joining today, and I'm really excited. I'm working with a new sponsor this month, VeriHeal. You'll hear me talk about that coming up. VeriHeal is going to help you get your medicinal marijuana prescription, so that's coming up as well. Great show. Learned a lot from both my guests. Always have fun talking to Christian Finnegan, and it's great to get Julie on, and I'm very excited to share both of them with you. So let's get it started right now. Finnegan Fridays. We always love when Christian joins us. He, of course, is a very talented, highly respected stand-up comedian. Tweets at Christ Finnegan. You can go to christianfinnegan.com. Get his albums and support him there. We covered a lot of ground on this show, from the fireworks to the insurrection anniversary and much, much more. Here we go right now. Let's get it started with Christian Finnegan. There he is, Christian Finnegan, and it's Friday, and so I always coax him into speaking with me, and I do actually kind of want to recap a few things of the week with you. It's always kind of the effort, but we go where we can go. So I wanted to start by asking you if you were in New York City on the 4th of July and how you feel about fireworks, being a pet owner.
Not a fan of fireworks in general.
Why?
Well, you know, on my
America?
very first, that is part of it. But on my very first album, I have like a long chunk of material about how people pretend that they love fireworks and actually don't. I'm of the opinion that nobody really likes fireworks. They're all just pretending. They like the idea of liking fireworks, and they like the sort of things that come along with fireworks in their brain, of hanging out with friends and having hot dogs and stuff like that. But that they're the same fireworks they've been since I was a little kid, and they're very boring, and people stare up at the sky and pretend to be amazed every year.
You had me all the way to the end, and when they are different, then they have gotten better. They have gotten. I think that you can spell your name. Did you not see the inauguration or the whenever the Biden?
But those aren't the ones you see. I mean, which one? I mean,
maybe those are drones.
I get amazed when I see those like Chinese drone, but they have like thousands of drones that sort of like form a person and stuff like that. But you know, I will admit that I stopped paying attention a number of years ago, but
what is your
just don't give a shit.
Yeah, I just don't. I can like the way they look, but not the way they sound, and that's a real juxtaposition. That's a weird position to be. I'm like, oh, that's pretty. I don't like that sound. It's very loud, though. Does it have to be so loud?
Very loud. It doesn't, and I don't know that they have to be. Like, there's got to be, in the same way that like you hear cars that have, you know, that's like fart cars. It's like, oh, you're doing that on purpose. You don't. Your car doesn't need to be that loud. Motorcycle. I remember I was watching a show, an episode of American Chopper, as I'm wont to do.
Go ahead.
I think it's maybe the only episode of American Chopper I've ever seen. I think I was on an airplane, and
you were in the hospital, and it was the only channel.
I mean, essentially, it was like I was toggling through JetBlue's channels, and they had designed an electric motorcycle, and they were saying, well, this will never sell because it doesn't make the loud noise, and people who ride motorcycles, they want it to be super loud. It's like, that fully backs up my theory that these people are idiots and assholes. Not idiots, assholes.
Yeah, Well, probably both. But I want to ask you, like, have you ever thought about some guy pulls up next to you with a Honda or a Mustang with one of those loud exhaust systems? Have you ever thought about, if you sat down with that person, if you could find any good quality in them?
It would be about like talking about the Knicks or something like that. That would be the only sort of common ground I would be able to find. Probably that's
where you would go.
Probably that's where it would be. It would have to be sports. It would have to be sports. Yeah. Whenever I hear one of those loud cars, I think to myself, don't you want to listen to music? Don't you want to listen to a podcast or something? Is making yourself unignorable to those around you the only focus of your life? Do you feel so invisible in your life that you just must make people acknowledge you? Any attention is better than no attention. Just whatever I need to do to make people turn their head and acknowledge that I am a human being, that I am alive, is worth it.
I think that is an excellent analysis. We were driving down the thruway, which you travel on, right? That road, the New York State Thruway. And
I've heard of it.
On last week, and a giant pickup truck came flying through, making like very loud noise, way jacked up, that pickup truck with the big exhaust pipes, and going 80 miles an hour past the car ahead of me on the left, meaning he went off of the highway onto the gravelly shoulder going 80 because he couldn't pass on the right because there's another car there, and pulled in front of the guy. Once he got in front of the guy, he then smoked him. He spy hunter, had that black smoke come out, and I wanted to catch up to him and murder him, but I had my family in the car.
Desired response.
But I had a CRV with my family in the car, so I decided not to.
I understand that if you drive a big pickup like that, if that makes you feel a certain way and my driving a Honda Fit makes you view me a certain way, go ahead. Right. I don't care. You are Jean-Paul Sartre would say you're living in bad faith, sir. But
well, what is that? But it's a gender. It's a kind of a toughness thing, right? And it's a kind of a guy thing. Like anybody who thinks about that,
it's a dominance thing.
Well, we've talked about this before. Like your animal, your dog, or if you have a cat or whatever animal you have, and your car. Like there's certainly women can talk about this, I suppose too. But there's certainly a man, certain kind of dog, you're a tougher, stronger guy. Certain kind of automobile, you're a tougher, strong guy. And then there's me and you and a lot of other guys that are like, well, I don't. I like this dog and this little car. What are you talking about? What does that say about me? My car and my dog say something about me?
I will never understand it. And part of me feels like maybe if I did size myself up against other men, maybe I would. I don't know. Maybe my life would be different in ways that are better, or I don't know. Things would be clearer. It would be it would be much easier to know how to live if everything was a competition to sort of establish dominance over other people. Even just driving to the mall, even if driving to the mall was an opportunity to establish dominance over a Honda Fit driver.
It is. To some people, it really definitely is.
Yeah.
Though.
I envy it on some level.
I want to ask you about just in general, and I always grapple with the idea of patriotism, and I thought we could talk a little bit about that. How does that word hit you? Do you define yourself as a patriotic American? What do you think of the idea of a patriotism? I find it confusing, and I don't identify with it very well. And then I started thinking about who I might root for in an international sporting event. And I do like soccer. I watch soccer, so I do root for the men and women's national soccer team. And I think Olympics, I'd probably root. But I don't care that much in sports. I'm like, oh, I want to see a good game and a good story behind it. But other than that, when it comes to the military or anything else, I don't really get it. I grew out of it. Maybe I used to when I was little. Now I'm just, I don't understand.
This is where, I feel like there's constantly movements on the left, and I use that is a lowercase left, people left of center and in all varieties, to sort of reclaim patriotism on behalf of liberals and progressives, and I admire the pursuit. And there are many things about the American experiment that I feel super fortunate to have been born in this country, and I love the fact that I live in a country that is centered on an idea more than just theoretically. It's supposed to be centered on an idea, not just a specific strain of human being that happen to be born in a certain area geographically. You are French, or, up until recently, up until the last 100 years, you are French if you were born in France, you were Spanish if you were born in Spain, to be an American was much more about a set of ideals and principles. I mean, obviously we know that that's not actually true in day-to-day life, but that's the idea of America. And I've always felt very fortunate to have been born in this country where the remedies for fixing it are in its founding documents, theoretically. But the word patriotism has been misused by fascists and jackasses my entire life. It probably has been since the day America was founded. And so part of me feels like it's a game progressives and liberals can't win, because patriotism in the minds of those people is more about establishing hegemony than it is about sort of wrestling with the tough questions. To me, to be an American is to wrestle with the tough questions, is to try to perfect, to sort of have who we are on a day-to-day basis meet the ideals of who we could be.
Trying to find
that, to me, that is the American experiment. But that's not it for most or a lot of people in this country, at least half. For a large part of the country, it is, will you fall in line? Will you face the flag? Will you, I'm sure if you saw that clip that was going around on social media yesterday about some weirdo who started singing a national anthem in the middle of Walmart and everybody just stopped and put their hands on their chest, and people were passing around like, oh, this is what's great about America. It's like, no, this is an obedience ritual. That, first of all, it's some dummy in Walmart who sees an opportunity to go viral. And then everyone else is just sort of falling into line, because to sort of fall into line is to show that you are the right kind of patriot. Like, if I were to walk through that crowd with two middle fingers held aloft in the sky, you could argue that I'd be doing the most American thing there.
Yeah. And I do want to see that video. Did you see a similar video somewhat where a track and field athlete who is the pole vaulter man is running down the pole vaulting lane course? He stops because the national anthem was playing, and he salutes it. And he's a former, apparently like a military member or something. He stopped running and dropped his pole and paid tribute to the anthem and the flag.
Okay, sure.
I mean, whatever. I want to follow him around all of his life and just put it like a speaker. He's like at the grocery store.
Like as he's
sex.
Going down, he's going down like a ski ramp to do like a jump, and then you just automatically start playing the national anthem.
He's on the ski jump. He has to turn into a snowplow. Everything in his life, no matter what, he has to stop if he hears that anthem and stop whatever he's doing.
And, some of this is just a contrary nature that I have, and I think a lot of comedians have. But the whole rooting for America during the Olympics, it's really the knots that the Olympic broadcasters twist themselves in to sort of try to portray America as an underdog in any sport. I mean, just in terms of sheer number, there's no country that is as large as America that is also as rich as America in terms of what the average athlete is, has access to. I mean, maybe that's changed over the last decade or so. I don't know what it's like to be an Olympic athlete in China. But, I remember, the classic Miracle on Ice, 1980, and they're like, do you believe in miracles? And they're like, they defeated the vicious Soviet hockey machine. It's like, This is all these people have. Do you understand, American ice hockey players? You have ruined these people's lives. like, if you had lost, it would have been fine. I'm not saying I root against them, but it's just like, let's not pretend. Yeah. These Olympic athletes from other countries, they are, they're brought up from embryos to sort of play this sport on behalf of their nation. I'm sorry, I'm babbling a little bit, but the idea that America is sort of this gritty underdog, it's like to take on the track and field, dynamo known as Jamaica or something, you know what I mean? That's like, how about we let Jamaica have this? Can we let, Slovakia, can we let them have the female gymnast? Like, do we have to sort of it's not just that we dominate everything, but the sort of mythology that we surround ourselves with to cover up the fact that basically our country has more money and our athletes are able to be trained in ways that are better and also psychologically less damaging than other countries.
Well, there is, some of these countries, there is a much larger consequences too if they lose. Have you ever thought about, shouldn't we do that? Shouldn't we punish them the way the Iranians and maybe the Russians and Chinese do if they lose?
Oh yeah, I think it's very clear that these people should all be sent immediately up against the wall. The wall. The second you lose the hammer toss, you should be executed in the town square.
Well, hammer toss? I didn't even know that was a thing until that woman defied the anthem. I was like, wait, what? I think a lot of people learned that was actually an event. What about the woman Shikaria, who is the sprinter? She's the fastest woman in the world, apparently, and she's not. Sorry to laugh, but she's not able to go to the Olympics because she smoked weed, and I'm kind of a little bit torn by that because it's like, you're an athlete. There's pretty, those are the rules. Just don't do them. But it's also like the other part of me is like, wait, why is that a rule? How is that a rule?
It's so absurd. I mean, it's so absurd.
Why would you do that to anybody? Why would you make that a rule? And even so, why would you?
Because it's a vestige of a different generation. Because to try to change that is almost to imply that that you were wrong in the first place. It's like you can't start pulling at that thread, because then what does that mean? Athletes who have been disqualified in the past are liable for damage. I mean, I'm extrapolating. I'm being a little silly, but it's a sort of clown rule that hopefully, if nothing else, this will shine enough light that it gets readdressed, because clearly that's absurd. Something that is, legal around, in many states in the country and on its way to being legal in the entire country in the next 10 years, that is going to be something that stops you from participating in Olympic competition when it has nothing to do with athletics. If anything, it's would mitigate your ability to perform well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd. I felt a little less bad about it when all of a sudden tweets of hers praising Chris Brown and talking about how she opposes not Lil Nas X because he came out as gay. Like it's, I feel a little less bad. But this is the world we live in now. It's like, hey, that person that you really admire and that you were feeling bad for, that person's also an asshole. So,
hey friends, let me just take a quick break in my conversation with Christian to tell you about a new sponsor I'm working with this month. Really excited to tell you about VeriHeal, because it's all about getting access to medical marijuana. I use the stuff. I love the stuff. And now it's legal in 36 states, probably yours. And if you're thinking about getting your medical marijuana card, then awesome. You're going to want to know about this. If you're not, then tell your friends, because this is like a really good thing to say at like a dinner party, or who has dinner parties? Wherever, a barbecue. I don't know, wherever you are. It's just, hey, do you know how you can get your medical marijuana license? Yeah, VeriHeal. It's the easiest way to do it. Go to VeriHeal.com, VeriHeal.com. You pre-qualify online, then you meet with a licensed medical marijuana doctor online, on demand. Totally easy. The alternative is try to find a doctor in your area. You make an appointment, you drive to their office, you sit in a waiting room with a bunch of annoying people, probably mass strangers wondering, why am I here? Why did I do this
online? Why didn't I use VeriHeal? And if you do it on your own, you could also spend twice as much. And the kicker is, if for whatever reason you're not approved for your medical marijuana card, VeriHeal gives you a full refund. If you went to a local doctor, got turned down, do you think they give you a refund? No. Think again. So VeriHeal's got tons of great reviews from over 150,000 people who have already used VeriHeal to get their medical marijuana card. I did this a few years ago with another company. I don't even remember them. It was super annoying. VeriHeal is not. It's simple. Tell your friends. Pre-qualify online less than 5 minutes. Anytime, 24/7. And if you live in a state where recreational cannabis is legal, guess what? You still want to get a medical marijuana card so you don't have to pay those crazy high taxes. I know you were wondering about that. No, recreational users pay higher taxes. Get your medical marijuana license. You can also buy more, grow more, and possess more than recreational users. Just so many good reasons to visit VeriHeal.com. Even if you don't use weed, just go check it out. That's VeriHeal, VeriHeal.com, VeriHeal.com, site to have them sponsoring the podcast. Now back to my conversation with the great Christian Finnegan. Well, let me just get back to this question of patriotism, because I love community. I love being on a team. I mean, I think it's great when your community and when your team, when your organization, your nonprofit accomplishes something. When your wife's business, and the people that all work there, succeed. Like, that's great. I like having pride in a thing of working with other people, but I get discouraged about kind of patriotism or about community in a larger way when, in our case, a very giant and diverse country, I get it, though, can't come together to fight COVID. And so we were just so divided over this in terms of closing down businesses and then social distancing, obviously, to some extent, but certainly the masks were divisive. And now we're at the vaccines. Like, if America can't come together to defeat this disease, which is so defeatable, and a whole bunch of people have, though, in certain communities we have, and the scientific community came together to create the vaccine, and government has come together to roll it out. But as long as we can't do that, it just seems like are we that good? Like, if we can't accomplish that, we're not. Obviously,
it certainly doesn't bode well for the future of this country. Every generation of people thinks that they're existing during this sort of downfall, that like, oh, these are the end times, and so it's very easy sometimes to think like, oh, my God, America is about to implode and fall into fascism or just fall into anarchy or whatever. And sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm sure if you were watching TV in the 60s and you were seeing, Kent State, and all the, Vietnam riots and all, you probably felt the same thing then. And maybe specifically in a one-to-one comparison, maybe when the Spanish flu was going along, maybe there were a bunch of people who were being idiots back then. I don't know. Like, history kind of operates in broad strokes. So now it sort of seems to us as if there was sort of a uniform response to it from everybody, but maybe that wasn't the case if you actually lived through it. But it's certainly not encouraging. It's certainly, this pandemic to come along at that particular moment with this particular political dynamic that was going on. It certainly didn't help. It certainly doesn't help. And, if the pandemic had happened when Obama was not even Obama. If it happened when George W. Bush was president, I think it would have been a lot less controversial in 100 different ways. No doubt. But
it's just so hard.
If Obama was trying to get people to take vaccines, you would have had of the same bullshit. Yeah. And obviously Trump is a fucking idiot. So
yeah, they would have replaced the whole Bill Gates conspiracy with Obama for sure. He's the one who's chipping us. But I also think you could make a different argument, as a lot of people have made, I think be somewhat accurate, that without the pandemic, Trump would have gotten reelected. Like, the pandemic, people could make the argument of why he lost.
Well, yes and no. Yes, I've certainly heard that argument, and I've heard it made persuasively. But, a lot of times these pandemics, they're supposed to be kind of a layup for world leaders. The fact that Trump couldn't turn it to his advantage politically, not for the country, but it's like it's sort of like when there's a national tragedy, Bush standing on top of the rubble after 9/11, usually these are opportunities for presidents to sort of burnish their bona fides. Like it makes them look like, larger than life figures and saviors and heroes. And you look at a lot of leaders around the country. Yeah. Wartime. Exactly. Wartime president. But, obviously the prime minister of New Zealand, I believe is prime minister, not a president. Right. Jacinda, whatever her name is. Like, there were certain world leaders that came out of it looking really good. Merkel, and so, I understand the argument that without the pandemic, Trump would have gotten reelected. But I don't know, because I'm sure that at least in those first few months, a lot of those people in the middle probably were willing to rally around Trump, but he just didn't know he couldn't do anything with them. He couldn't do anything with that sort of that running room.
Do you see any way forward on the issue of, getting those who are still not vaccinated? It's been fascinating this week to see all this data play out, that it's literally right down to the district of who voted for who, like the Biden states versus the Trump states, red versus blue, and then breaking right down the district where they're unvaccinated or under-vaccinated. And I just don't know what it's going to take.
A bunch of people dying. I mean, like mass deaths. I don't know. I don't know, unless they find some way to rebrand it, that they put it in pill form, or they, oh, this isn't the vaccine, this is the Maxine, or whatever. They just find something.
I saw someone just propose that they should pay them. Just pay them all. But then that would be kind of annoying to the rest of us who didn't get a check for the vaccine.
It would be annoying. And I don't know how much you would have to pay them. How much is going back on my Facebook wall postings for the past 6 years worth to me? It's probably going to be a few $100 at least.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That it's like, you're asking me, if I'm a person who won't get vaccinated, if I'm like a Trump person who won't get vaccinated, you're asking me not just to get vaccinated, but to basically sell out myself. To
I've been anti-vax for years, and now I'm going to sell out for $500.
Exactly. Which, it could work. Yeah. Could work, but
could work with the gun buybacks too. Super gun guy. And then someone's like, how about $150 for that shotgun? You got it, boss.
I don't know. I don't know.
That's a good point. No, it's a really interesting point.
But if they find a way to call it something different or to rebrand it, people, I've heard people say that if he had given Trump credit for it, if they called it the Trump vaccine or something like that, maybe that would make a difference. But I don't know.
When you saw the video of Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg on a e-surfboard hydrofoil with an American flag, I literally did think of you. I was like, I wonder what Christian thinks about this video. And did you watch it? And did you watch it again another time?
It's just weird to know that someone has access to my dream journal like that. I mean, I saw your tweet about it, and you're right. I watched it 3 times because whatever that is looked really fun. It's wakeboarding. Is that what that is?
It's got a few different names, I know, but it's generally...
What is the thing that goes into the water? There's like the surfboard that's riding like 2 feet above the water, and then there's something that goes
into the water. It's a fin with a propeller. It's a foil. They're called.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it
looks super fun.
I looked up the price of them, and they're like thousands and thousands of dollars. So they're not, but I would rent one. What
do you think would be the price? What do you think something like that would have to cost for Mark Zuckerberg to be like, nah, I'm going to pass?
I mean, I don't know, but I did have a little bit of respect for him. Like, if you're him and people either mostly probably hate you or don't have an opinion of you or are done with you, like, you can fuck with the world by doing some rando thing. And it was I really gained a tiny bit of respect for him for just doing that and putting it out there for all of us to be like, what is happening? What is this? Like, I think that he must have thought that. He must have been like, let's just fuck with everybody. Let me just do this. Get an American flag.
I don't know. Or is he just so removed from, is he such an alien, as the sort of meme goes, that he's just like, this is what cool people do. I'm going to do a cool thing, and then people will think I'm cool.
I hope that's,
what I mean?
I hope that is the case, but I don't know. I would
like
I
in
would
the background is he playing like Sammy Hagar and like in his mind or whatever.
But
like,
I would definitely support, and I would personally be for if you came up with an idea, Pete, go do this, make this video just to see, just to go put a weird outfit on and do this thing. I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Let's see what happens with that. But
I don't have any credibility to waste.
like, what am I exactly? This was the 6-month anniversary. No. What are we calling it, of January 6th. And I've been reading a lot about it and talking about it. We all have probably for the last 6 months. And I kept coming back to this one idea, which was all of those people attack pretty clearly were there to prevent the certification of the election. That's why they went there. There's like not a lot of gray area to me. They tried to overthrow the election. They didn't believe it was legitimate, whatever, but that was their mission. That's what they were doing. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that that's what they were doing. And I don't really need to overthink it. I'm not saying what the consequence should be, but like we should agree that that's what they were doing there. Period.
Yeah. Well, and obviously there's always going to be the sort of cannon fodder of sort of just dumb people who would show up at the rallies, the, Tea Party rallies in the 2010 wearing tricorner hats and crap like that, who are just kind of like people who go to rallies. There's always going to be those people. And I'm sure that there were a lot of people who thought like, we're going to make a stink. We're going to go down fighting. Like this is our last hurrah, but didn't really think anything was going to come of it. They thought it was just kind of a chance to sort of kind of like the Women's March was for liberals. It's like nobody showed up to the Women's March. I think thinking that was going to cause, Hillary to become president all of a sudden, but it was a show of defiance and a show of fuck you. I'm not going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like you were not defeated. And so I think there were a lot of people for whom that's what January 6th was. It was sort of their last hurrah to kind of to show out and be like, we're not defeated. We're not going anywhere. Fuck you. But there is, to me, very little doubt at this point that for a lot of people, it was a clear plot. I mean, it was an action item. I mean, and I don't necessarily know how thought through it was. A lot of those people who flooded into the Capitol, they were like, we're going to stay all night and they won't be able to certify the states. And then they never were really clear about what would happen then. It's like, I don't know what I'm sure that they have some crazy whiteboard with, arrows pointing in 1,000 directions about what was going to happen. But you can very clearly see that for certain groups of people, the Oath Keepers, 3%ers, some of the Proud Boys working with fucking Roger Stone and all those people, that their plan was at the very least to just create so much chaos that Trump would then invoke the Insurrection Act. And at that point, all bets are off. These are people who quite clearly were willing to take America down a road that it had never gone down before with no clear idea of how to unravel it in a non-violent, non-revolutionary way. It's very clear that these people were just like, it was that Fire Festival that, well, fuck it. Let's, what do they say? Let's just do it and be legends or, that attitude when that movie, when the Fire Festival thing came out. Yeah. It's very clear that for a lot of people, it was just kind of like, we're going down with the ship or we're going to light this thing on fire and then we'll be the one standing on top of the wreckage.
Very unrealistic idea. Didn't work out that way. Usually
closer than I would have imagined. That's for sure.
The other thing I just wanted to talk with you about, of course, is the idea that if you attack someone publicly, I don't know if you saw this video or not, in like a racist or sexist way or something like that, like this awful guy in New Jersey, white guy goes up to this black guy who's his neighbor, and as I call it, he used the whole racist trifecta, N-word, monkey, go back to Africa, like did it all, like all. I think those are pretty much the three worst that you can do. He dug deep, he got them all, and over, and then he kept yelling his address. Like, yeah, go ahead. What are you going to do? Send the cops? Let's send them right over. They have no authority. Did you see this video?
I haven't seen this.
And yeah, well, I'm a garbage person, so I watch these things. Like I'll stop whatever I'm doing.
More than I want to.
I'll stop whatever I'm doing. I could be saving a life. Like, what's that? And as a result, this has happened a few times. And I what I tweeted about it was like, I want to live in the country or in the society where if you yell racist things, in this case, if you yell horrible things about black people, 100 black people show up at your house and jeer you and heckle. I mean, they shouldn't burn it down or hurt you, but that's happened a few times. That's what happened. This guy yelled his address. He yelled the N-word a million times at a black guy, then yelled his address. So a bunch of people showed up at his house. And I'm like, I love that consequence. You're going to videotape yourself doing racist stuff and yell your address. We're having a party in front of your house.
I worry about that kind of thing, honestly, just because those situations are always a lot more fluid than you think they're going to be going in. Right. And it doesn't take much. Somebody, lights off a firecracker that sounds like a gun. You know what I mean? There's
you're right.
Somebody, a neighbor tries to pull around the crowd and then accidentally clip somebody, and there's just so many ways those situations can spiral out of control. That was honestly the thing about not just the January 6th, but when Trump had the Foley Square or whatever the square in DC was where he had cleared out so he could do a stupid Bible photo op. I'm sorry?
Lafayette.
Yeah. Lafayette Park. Those situations, they very rarely go completely according to plan. And there's just so many ways that they can kind of explode into something entirely different. But yes, in theory.
Wow, you really took the fun out of that. with your accurate assessment of the possible horrible dangers and massacres that could occur. We've all showed up at your house and now you come flying out with a gun, and that happened with those rich assholes in St. Louis up in front of their castle.
Mm-hmm.
That house, their castle that they lived in.
And apparently they're like the biggest clowns in that entire, everyone in that development hates them.
Oh, I wonder why. Yeah. That's so surprising to me. All right. Well, do you think finally that Colin Jost, who we know is a comedian from Saturday Night Live now, well known, and he's married to one of the most famous actresses out there, Scarlett Johansson. Apparently she's pregnant. She's got a big movie coming out. They're being called America's royal family, and I was really offended by that, shocked by it. All
right, you're doing that thing that journalists or the people on Twitter do. It's like they're not being called America's royal family. One random headline referred to them as America's royal family.
You're absolutely right. I've played into that. I have no idea where that came from, and I thought maybe I just missed the boat on it because I don't pay close attention. But I was like, what? I look at that and say Colin Jost is like the luckiest dude ever. Because he married one of the most successful actresses, one of the most beautiful actresses.
If you look at the sort of power and recognizability of Queen Elizabeth vis-a-vis Prince Philip, then actually it kind of makes sense. Do you know what I mean? If you think of Colin Jost as being the Prince Philip and Scarlett Johansson being the Queen Elizabeth, it kind of makes sense. That kind of works.
I also don't want a royal family. I don't want to. And who would want to be that? Who would want that moniker? I mean, maybe it's good. Your publicist is like, oh, that's great that they're calling you that. But that's a lot of pressure to stay married to that person. It's like America's sweetheart. Maybe you aren't. Maybe you're an asshole.
Far be it from me to talk smack about people who are invested in the lives of celebrities, given that for 5 or 6 years I was on VH1's Best Week Ever, and that's pretty much all we talked about. But it always, even when I was on that show, I'd meet people doing live shows and be like, Best Week Ever is the only news I watch. I'd be like, that's terrifying. That's bad. And you shouldn't say that out loud. But for some people, it's a balm. It's a balm to think about celebrities' lives.
All right, last question for you that I want to get your take. It's a very important cultural American thing. It is apparently a 4th of July tradition, and that is hot dog eating contest or food eating contests. Where are you? What are your thoughts on eating as much of anything as you can to win a prize?
Go for it.
Are you entertained by it?
I went to the Nathan's hot dog contest once, and it was chaos. I mean, you can't see anything. It's I was maybe 30 yards back from the stage. You had bad seats. We had a luxury box for the hot dog eating contest. No, all you see is just people's heads bobbing up and down and their hands moving really fast. Like you're not. And I just wish that some of them would take a little more time to savor it.
Can I just admit that I watched some of it, the highlights the next day, and then desperately for 48 hours wanted a hot dog? It really made me want
That made you want a hot dog?
It made me want a hot dog, and I don't really eat hot dogs.
I feel like it cures me of any desire to have a hot dog.
Yeah, I don't know.
Especially when they dip them in the water. Like, that's so gross to me. The wet bun, and they just shove the whole thing into their mouth. It's like, I could admire it just as sort of a geek feat. The same way that somebody, putting a nail through his lip or something like that. But it does not make me
similar. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I know I felt super weird about it, but I did need to tell somebody, and it was you, and apparently everybody listening. But yeah, I don't know why I felt so weird. I was like, why do I want a hot dog? I was I watched that stupid hot dog.
We're very jealous of your raspberry collections, Pete.
Yes,
yes. You've been posting pictures of your harvest. It's very impressive.
It's quite an investment. It's a 3-year investment, so I'm pretty proud. I'm very proud of it. The raspberries
this is the first time it's like you've had like a real yield.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, of those bushes, I had some other bushes. I stupidly mowed them down because I thought I was supposed to do that. They did not come back, but at the same time, I'd done these, and they came out this year, and they came out strong. And they bring me a lot of happiness.
A little delicious snack for you and your listeners that my wife makes sometimes. She'll melt down some like dark chocolate, and then she'll put a bunch of raspberries on a skewer, like on a long wood skewer, and then you just roll the skewer in the chocolate, and then you put like 10 on a plate, and you put them in the fridge, and you let them chill, and then you have a nice little delicious treat that you don't have to feel so terrible about.
I love that. I'm going to do it, and I appreciate that. And my wife has a ton of dark chocolate and likes it, so maybe I'll make that for her as well. Great way to wrap it up. Thank you very much, sir, for the recipe idea.
Appreciate it. Anything I can do to rekindle the amorous fires between you and your wife.
Christian Finnegan, everybody. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Christian Finnegan. Christian Finnegan, go say hello if you haven't already. Followed him on Twitter. I love talking to him every Friday, and so many of you love hearing from him as well. So thank you very much for that. And let's move on, shall we? Because very excited to bring you my next conversation. So many of you listened to her as well over the years when I was at SiriusXM. I think some of you probably still do listen to her now. She's on in the mornings on the POTUS channel on SiriusXM every single weekday. You can listen to her hosting Mason Mornings, 6 to 9 a.m. East on SiriusXM POTUS. It's Julie Mason. At Julie Mason, everybody. We had a great conversation, caught up, and talked to her about all of it. Politics, journalism, media, radio versus print, and so much more. I hope that you liked my conversation with Julie Mason, who it was so great to catch up with. She's on Twitter at Julie Mason. Please let her know that you heard her on the program. And here we go right now with my old friend, Julie Mason. Holy shit, it's Julie Mason.
Hi, Pete.
We're doing it. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to reconnect with you for the last however long we've been talking, and I'm really happy to have you on this show so I can ask you a billion questions.
It's such a tonic to see you again, Pete. I really miss you. And, your listeners on SiriusXM, I hear from them all the time, and they still say to me, I miss Pete Dominic. I'm like, okay, me too.
Well, yeah. How is one ever supposed to handle that? I had that experience too, for sure, when I went into other people's time slots, and oh God, they hated me. The Jay Thomas fans despised me, or the Ron, whoever it was, and I never blamed them. I was like, listen, like I didn't move into this house because I didn't kick him out of the house. It's a weird thing though to have to handle. Are you taking callers?
No, I mean it's 6 a.m. No one wants to talk. They just want to listen. It's all right.
So you're on in mornings now, and I miss you too. I miss working with you. I just, when you came into the company, I knew I was always smart enough to know as much as I could about a person before I said one word to them.
Ooh.
And when I saw that you'd been when I saw you'd been hired, I was like, oh, okay, so this is the direction that POTUS is going. They hired this person who has done all these things. This is a serious journalist, doing. And I always thought that was a really great move for them. And it still is a great move for them. And that's still a really good channel. And I wanted to ask you, for listeners of this podcast now, to just say, what did you do before you got into radio and on the politics channel?
I was a newspaper reporter for like 25 years before I got into radio, covering almost all politics, local, state, national, presidential campaigns, the White House. I'd been a White House reporter for 10 years when I came to SiriusXM. So I brought a lot of experience, which was funny because I was new to radio, but I was not new to news. But a lot of listeners, they don't like a girl talking about politics. So they would tell me that maybe I should host a cooking show or, stop giggling all day.
When you started there, that's what you would hear?
Yeah, I heard it for like the first 10 years.
Some of those comments were from me, but it wasn't because I didn't think you were good. It was just like, I wanted that slot. Let me just.
I worked 12 to 3 when I started. You didn't want that slot.
Well, I also didn't send those emails. I was genuinely psyched to have you. My point was, I thought you being hired gave the channel a lot of credibility in the company. That's how I always saw things. Well, what do I get out of this? This is good. This is good for the company, so it's good for me. When you were a newspaper reporter, like how is that so much? How is that different than what you do on radio?
It's totally different. It's totally different. The relationship with the audience is completely different. All you get, like one thing that print reporters say to each other all the time is don't read the comments. Just don't. When you file your story, they post it online. Just don't even look at it. Don't look at the comments. It's horrible. It will kill your soul. But sometimes you read the comments and it's 100% of hate. And so your relationship with the audience is one if they hate you. Right. But then when you're a broadcaster, you need to make people like you. And at work, I always had felt like my personality was a huge problem, Pete. Like it was always a problem for management. I was always kind of mouthy and sort of obnoxious. The traits that make a good journalist don't make a good employee. And so so my audience hated me and management mostly hated me. And so then I came to SiriusXM where it's completely different and you want to be liked and you want the audience to like you and you work towards that. So it's a completely different relationship all around and management seems to like me. Okay.
You've been there for a long time. I mean, I don't even know. I can't imagine I always thought you and your show were completely left alone. Like she's really good and your producer Patrick's really good. It's like they do great work. Let them do their work. I kind of felt like that was probably mostly the thing. And
I mean, no, they haven't meddled, but they do give me direction and tell me what's expected. And they check in with me all the time and will sort of sometimes redirect and say, well, a little less of that and a little more of this. And
sure. But I'm saying you're being self-deprecating, and I'm just saying, no, but the fact that you never got any trouble or never, is because you do great work. And a manager wants that. And certainly the executives at SiriusXM who we're talking about, like, they definitely want to not have to work on this thing or that thing. They want it. There's a lot of putting out fires in media management, and they would rather not have a fire to worry about. And I always felt like you weren't ever starting or even near any fires.
Thanks. Yeah, I try not to, even while handling, some pretty incendiary topics. At politics, Pete, as you know, like we used to say in political journalism that it was like sports and people like followed it like their sports team. And that was considered sort of like we looked at it as journalists, kind of a bad thing, right? That sports and politics are two different things. So let's keep them separate. But now people follow politics like it's religion, and they hate the other religions. And it's actually gotten worse. So the topics, I feel, are even more sensitive now.
Yeah, it's such a great point, such a great analogy. It's a great way of talking about how it's evolved as well. When you're on the POTUS channel, you know that you are talking to a national audience and Canadians too, right? And
parts of northern Mexico,
yeah, and international. I mean, you can listen obviously SiriusXM or pretty much everything anywhere now. But when you're at the Texas Tribune.
No, I was at the Houston Chronicle and Politico and briefly at the Examiner.
Did I insult a Texas reporter with the Texas Tribune?
No, not at all. I love the Tribune.
Yeah. So when you're at those three outlets, like who is that audience and who are you writing for and how does it change? Because we've always heard this word, the Beltway media, which I think you're a member of good standing in. Mm-hmm. And who is that reporting for? And who are subscribing to those newsletters and reading those? And then with POTUS, it's like, you have some guy driving his truck
in Canada or in Idaho, and you want that guy to enjoy the conversation, get something from the conversation, but maybe it has to be delivered a little bit differently, or maybe it doesn't. What do you think about how people receive it?
My approach has always been that what makes politics fun, Pete, is most politicians are at least half crazy, right? But they're funny, they're fun, and they're fun to talk to. And, you know, having spent 20 years covering Texas politics, like, I love Republicans, and I have as many on the show as I possibly can. And I love to chat with them about things. I mean, news things as well, but also to show a bit of their humanity. And I think that helps draw people into politics, because I think a lot of people approach politics with a certain resistance, saying it's boring, the issues are boring, the people are robots, this has nothing to do with my life. And my idea was to make it fun and interesting and sort of quirky, but also serious without taking away any of its seriousness, but make it sort of accessible and make it so people enjoyed politics and kind of got a kick out of it, rather than seeing it as like, my team wins, your team has to die, which is not an approach to politics I support.
Do you? So you're interviewing a lot of congressmen and congresswomen now, right?
Senators and governors,
and
yeah.
Politicians serving.
Politicians, yeah.
And is there a difference between Republicans and Democrats in terms of getting them on the show? Because, reading Cameron Joseph's piece and hearing your interview with him before I talk with him at Vice News is really interesting to learn about the relationship that, reporters now have with the people they're covering as a result of the insurrection, what happened there. They were all there and their different, interpretations of it. And just the Trump years of the media is the enemy of the people and like you're the enemy. Do you have trouble right now, getting Republicans on?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
People will come on if it's in their interest to do so. A lot of people who come on are running for another office or higher office or reelection, and it is in their interest to do so. And I also find that some of the sort of outlier Republicans who go a little crazy on like Fox News or Newsmax or OAN will come on SiriusXM onto the POTUS channel, and they'll be very reasonable, and they won't say that crazy stuff, and they just want to have a conversation and maybe show a different side of themselves. And I'm here for that. I'm not interested in being a fact checker, getting into arguments. One of the things, Pete, that frustrates me is that cable has gone, some more than others, to this model of like getting a Republican on to argue with them, to yell at them, to confront them.
Yeah, for sure.
That's not journalism. It has nothing to do with journalism. It's performative, partisanship. But it's also a trap that journalists fall into, because Republicans will say something like something outrageous, and they're trying to manipulate a journalist, especially in a broadcast situation, into taking the Democrats' position, right? They'll say something so that I'll come at them like I'm working for the DNC. And I'm not taking that bait. I'm not taking that bait at all. But I think people's expectations are now that an anchor will argue with a guest. And I feel like our audience is really smart. I mean, you know them. You know how educated and smart and up to date.
I dumbed them down for 4 years. They
No, you didn't. Anyway, so I trust them to know what's going on, that I don't have to interject and say, well, actually, Congressman, that's not quite correct. And I'm not into that. I don't like to do that.
Do you have, let's continue. I've always had a lot of respect for, and I've learned a lot from you, when you talk about journalism, you talk about reporting, you talk about even the nuts and bolts of it, the day to day, and what you think the responsibilities there are. And so how do you kind of just touch on this, define your responsibility as a journalist doing what you're doing on the radio every day on POTUS? What's your purpose?
Well, I know. God, that's such a direct question. I wish I had like a snappy answer to it. But it's a few things, right? Because it's to entertain and inform. Mm-hmm. It's also to provide added value. And I feel like my experience and my background and my relationship with a lot of these people who come on the show, and a lot of them are pre-existing relationships, people I've known for years, sources of mine who come on the show now, and they're relaxed because they know me and they know I'm not going to ask a stupid gotcha question, mm-hmm. or ask them like, can you define critical race theory? Like, we're not doing that. We're going to be smarter than that. And I think that's my obligation.
So I've loved listening to your interviews with all of these journalists because of what you're saying, your relationship with them and your understanding of the work that they do. And so just a question on what has changed. We both talked to Cameron Joseph and read that piece, but more importantly, you're in D.C., you know probably most of the reporters that were up there that day. And I don't know what you were doing, but I wonder what you think about if that was an inflection point for journalists covering at least the Republicans that were there that day, because they all had that experience. It's a very strange thing to look at I'm trying to look at it from a journalist's point of view, covering a Republican congressman who won't get vaccinated and won't wear a mask and won't admit that they got attacked, and what that changes the dynamic. So from the people, first of all, what were you doing that day and how has it affected you? Let me ask you that.
I'd already finished up my show and I wasn't up on the Hill, so it didn't affect me. I watched it in horror, the same as everyone. But I would go further back to Trump and Trump being a real inflection point for journalism. Okay. We used to be able to have like a comfortable distance from events, right? Like as a journalist, you'd go to events and you'd cover events, but you were not of the event. But then during the Trump era, and I really can't place it before Trump. But for example, you think of Lafayette Square and the clearing of Lafayette Square. Journalists were hurt. They were attacked. They were really, really hurt by police, by the crowds. They were swept up with the protesters and their equipment was damaged and things like that. And that didn't happen before. You could go into a war zone and be in a bit of danger, but you'd have a big thing that said press and everyone knew that you were Switzerland, that you were just there to cover events and it was in their interest to leave you alone.
Right.
But now journalists are getting swept up in these events and there's no more of that protection. There's no more of that sort of force field, that invisible force field around journalists. So now, like when you see it when they're covering, riots and protests around the country, they're getting arrested, they're getting beaten. And then you saw it at the Capitol. They were victims too. New York Times photographer was thrown to the ground and beaten. Her equipment was stolen. People were filming it. You saw that equipment outside of the Capitol that got smashed and they were writing like kill the media or something in graffiti. So we have become now like we're no longer hands off. And I think that's really changed the industry a lot. People are less willing to take risks for their jobs because now it is a real danger and a real risk. And they're reevaluating what they're willing to do with their careers. And you see what happened on the Hill. It was so bad. And journalists were really damaged by it. And it has a lingering after effect. I don't know how it changes coverage. People are professionals and they go about their job, and it hasn't changed how I cover the work. But I'm really curious and worried about my colleagues on the Hill.
Some journalists have created kind of a new threshold of who they'll even have on their program based on kind of a litmus test over the insurrection and the election. If they're going to say that Trump won the election, then they're not going to be invited on. Do you have any kind of test like that for anybody?
Because I cover politics the way they are, Pete, not the way we would wish them to be. I don't have the luxury of only having virtuous, upright Democrats. I mean, I can't have Sherrod Brown on the show every day. Sometimes I gotta throw someone else in, and I'm happy to do that because a lot of people were stunned and surprised by Trump's victory, right? His win in 2016. People didn't see that coming. Well, I'm not going to let that happen where people don't see that it's coming, that Republicans are probably going to take over the House this year. And we need to understand what their messaging is, what they're talking about, how it's resonating with people. But to only have like virtuous, upright, non-traitors on the show would be a disservice to what we're trying to do. Got to have all the voices so that we understand what's happening. I almost consider it like I tell listeners who are Democrats, like think of it as getting a glimpse into the other team's playbook. You get to understand where they're coming from and what they're saying. If you're only going to want to hear from Democrats, if you only want an echo chamber, well, you're probably saying like, it's so bad about those Republicans in their echo chamber while you only watch Rachel Maddow.
I do know. I live in that echo chamber most of the time. Yeah, I've been listening to Ben Shapiro lately, his podcast, and I'm learning more about podcasting than I am about his political point of view because he just does like so many ads and plugs and everything. I'm like, that's the other thing about like radio too. At least at Sirius, like I wasn't doing live reads and I wasn't selling a book. Like if you listen to like a Mark Levin, for example, is like one of the biggest right-wing radio, like he's selling stuff like half the time.
I got to make a buck, right?
Yeah, but I was kind of like, even if I loved you, like, I don't want to hear, can you talk with somebody about something? Like, how is this interesting? It just ruined the experience for me. Anyway, by the way, I do have to do a live read for Meat right now, Julie. Sorry. Meat. It's coming in a box. I'll be doing that soon. Okay, that's it. It's over.
I do live reads. I'm happy to do it. I do get some grief about it. I do get people saying, well, you have no credibility because you do live read, you do live ads. I'm like, well, if this ad for a mattress that I actually love undermines, 35 years in journalism, then okay. I don't care. It's important. I mean, it keeps people in work. We had layoffs, people lost their jobs. The company, I don't know what the numbers are, but every company that relies on subscribers and advertising was hurt in the pandemic. So
when I was at Sirius, I did a live read for My Pillow.
For My Pillow, wow.
Which I now call, I just saw this yesterday on Twitter and I think it's funny. Hee hee ha ha. It's Mine Pillow. That makes me laugh.
Did they send you those free?
Yeah.
Did you like them? Were they good? Were those good
God,
photos?
it really was like, I had no idea about that man or his politics. I didn't even know he was like this very Christian guy or anything. None of it. All I knew was, I remember thinking, I was like, oh my God, this is a pillow. And it's like, the only pillow I've ever seen marketed, and it's awful. It's like chunky.
Is it full of buckwheat or something? It's full of like husks or...
It's all onions, hard onions. Yeah. They have a garlic one for Steve Bannon.
For vampires and Bannon.
I don't know if there's an and there, or he's the leader. So what's next? I want to ask you more about where we're at. I mean, I want to get your analysis. I do want to get your analysis on politics a little bit in terms of the elections and the midterms. With all this, I don't know how much you think the voting rights issues will affect the actual elections in different states and districts, or the census, or gerrymandering. We can talk about all of that. But the broader question I have for someone as plugged in as you is, what do you think about the midterm elections? Is there any way should we be talking about them? Are they too far away? Can it change?
No, it's happening. It's happening. People are running hard for next year's elections already. I mean, already for president for 2024, that's happening. We talk about that, and you have to talk about all of it because it's happening. I get that people are uncomfortable with how long and arduous these campaigns are, but it's once again, it's covering politics the way they are and not the way they ought to be. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's frustrating because Republicans just seem in a grip of madness right now, and hashtag not all Republicans, but a goodly number. But at the same time, as I said, I do think they're well positioned to take at least the House in the midterms. I don't know about the Senate, but it feels in DC right now, Pete, it feels like divided government. Even though Democrats are running everything, they're really not. It just feels like it's still like half and half.
Who's running for president?
Oh, God, all those Republicans.
Yeah, who are we talking about?
Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, Josh Hawley, probably Ted Cruz, probably Chris Christie, the whole gang. They're all out there. They're all like Rick Scott making surreptitious trips to Iowa, things like that. They're all starting. Is there any... Ron DeSantis.
I that was the top name I was thinking. But is there anybody... Can a Republican get the nomination and not have the Donald Trump support?
Well, that's what the midterms are going to tell us, in part, about the strength of Trump's grip on the party, because he's already making endorsements. He's already out there endorsing candidates, here and there. He's going to do more in primary races, too. He's picking and choosing candidates, and we'll see if he gets a whole slate elected, then that says something about 2024. But I mean, I don't even know if he's going to run. Do you? I mean, what's your vibe? How are you vibing on Trump running in 2024? It seems unlikely to me.
I think that it's hard to know. It all. I feel like it matters, like a lot of the legal stuff that's happening in terms of how much attention he might need to pay that, and want to be involved with that. But I mean, my answer about Donald Trump has always got to be the same. It's like he's always going to do whatever is best for him and what he wants, and it's certainly a good way to make money, I guess. So he's, and before we took him seriously, he ran like a bunch of times, right? Because it was just a way to get his name out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And while anybody does it. And so I don't know. I think it's all about, like, if he can make money on it, and maybe he has to, because I don't know, I can't imagine, like, how you get sued by so many different directions and afford the defense. That's crazy. I almost feel bad for him. I'm like, couldn't we just point to anybody that I don't, but couldn't we just point to anybody we don't like and send a bunch of lawsuits their way if we had the funding on our side, and then they would be, I mean, that's what he used to do to the people that he owed money to. So I don't know. That's crazy to me, what's happening with him. But the question about his endorsement is everything to me. Like for every single district, like certain districts that maybe you might not need it, but I feel like still you do.
People really want it. Candidates really want it. They're competing for it. They're vying for it. It's Canis Mas Maga. Like who can hug him tightest? You know, who can be more like him? And whether that wins or not, I don't know.
Yeah, it's really.
In some places it will.
How do you think the pandemic and the reaction to it, certainly right now, in terms of the vaccinations and seeing, it's so crazy to me that you actually, Julia Mason, who's a political analyst, really, really well respected one, very good at it, has been doing it for a long time, can look at this, but now you also can kind of look at like epidemiology and say, holy shit, Julie, the blue states, literally the districts are vaccinated and the red ones are not. It's connected directly to politics.
And here's what I don't get is there's this complaint out of the red districts that Trump doesn't get enough credit for the vaccine. And it's his vaccine and no one's taking that away from him. And yet they still won't get it. Like they love Trump, but they don't love his vaccine. I mean, he brought these vaccines forward. He made that happen and they still won't take it. That's what I don't understand. That's the disconnect for me.
And wouldn't that all change if he had gotten vaccinated on camera and just said, go do it? I don't know. Maybe. I
don't know.
No, it's a great point, but I wonder how that affects elections. I wonder how the vaccination rollout or the pandemic or COVID affects the midterms.
I mean, polling has been rendered so useless largely because it's like everything falls along partisan lines now, like everything. Although, you know, Biden's handling of the pandemic has registered in about the low 60s, like 63-ish% approval. So that's a little bit bipartisan, but so many other things, it just breaks down along partisan lines. And it's like, you don't even really have to poll anymore. You know, you just have to imagine that half the country likes it and half the country hates it. And that's just how it's going to be on any subject.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. What about polling? That's my question. That's my question to you. What about polling?
Polling is still legit and pollsters still are trying to do good and serious work. It hurts me and it harms our system that so many people have lost faith in it. I would say it's analogous to how many people have lost faith in journalism. But I think part of it is just not understanding how polling works. You know, people always say to me, well, no one's ever called me. It's like, I don't know, 330 million people in this country. They're going to get around to you eventually. Maybe, probably not though. You know, and it's like, well, do you ever answer calls on your cell phone that you don't know? No. Well, you're never going to hear from a pollster then because they have, and they say, you know, no one has landlines. How are they polling? Well, pollsters actually have your cell phone number in a book. They have that. They have those numbers and they're calling you. It's just, it says something weird. So you're not picking up.
The sign of a really good radio host is someone who can do both sides and both voices. You've always been so good at that. I love when you do that. Is anybody calling you? No. You have so many characters in your repertoire that you can go to. These are based on real people. I've always suspected. That's also like a death of expertise in general. You mentioned journalists and pollsters. There's you know, institutions in general have taken such a beating, and I don't know how that
so-called health experts like Fauci, so-called. Like, come on.
Or just like, yeah, I mean, like something less.
You're a villain of that guy, Pete. I have no idea. I'm sorry. Go on.
Well, no, it's so much to say about that. But I mean, do you think there's any way that changes given how fragmented, to the point you mentioned about our echo chambers? Like you can stay in with podcasting and YouTube, like everybody has a show now for every brand of stripe. Mm-hmm. So I have a hard time seeing how it might change back to something more moderated where we can hear a bunch of, you know, just a thorough report on a thing. Objectively reported. Does it change back? Do we ever, you know, how do we do this?
I don't know. The country's just too big, and things do go in cycles and everything like that. But I don't know. There's just too much fragmentation. As you say, people can choose their own adventure in the information they get. And it's just hard to see that changing. It used to be Republicans used to agree that climate change was real. It's just the dispute was what caused it and how to fix it. But everyone was like, yes, climate change is real. Agreed upon fact, and then you go forward, and then there's the debate. But now it's like it's a hoax, it's a lie, it's BS.
Yeah, I mean that changed when they found out that the solution was going to be there's going to be a cost. We have to do something. It's one thing we're like, yeah, that's terrible. Well, we have to stop. We have to do something. We have to invest in it, raise taxes to do it. Everybody's got to be in on this solution. Nah, it's not a thing then. It's not a thing. Before I let you go, and I could talk to you for 17 hours, you have always been someone who I've looked up to as a female professional, meaning you always took seriously yourself as a woman, and you struck me as someone who was never looking at gender and being intimidated by men the way that a lot of women rightfully can be. And I love to watch you carry yourself at work. I love to watch you talk openly, and it could sometimes be intimidating, but I was like, but that's what I like. That's what I need. That's what we need, is someone who's going to tell you the truth, and also, more importantly, pivoting now to advocating for other women as well. You've always been that way. You've always been true, I think, to that, and advocating for women and standing up for women in the workspace, in journalism in Washington. How has that changed in the last few years? Do you think things are better? Are there more opportunities? Is there any less sexism in, even the kind of the subtle kind?
No, nothing changed.
I'm so sorry for laughing.
It's true, though. I'm not gonna be like, yeah, Me Too really changed everything, Pete. It's a whole different culture now. No, and I don't
fuck.
I mean worldwide. It's different because I do a lot of mentoring of young women in journalism, and some of my mentees have gone to great places, just gone on to fantastic careers, awesome. All of which I take entire credit for, which they roll their eyes at, but I mention it frequently to the point of, yeah. Anyway, but I
helped a bunch of people get hired at Sirius, and then they fired me. No, it's the thing that you're most proud of is the mentorship. Go ahead. Sorry.
I am really proud of it. And but younger women coming up today are much more activist. They want their journalism. And when I speak to classes too, I notice it. The questions I get are, how do you use your feminism, or how do you use journalism to promote feminism? And to me, the question is almost offensive. I do not. Certainly I'm interested in feminism and the expressions of feminism, but I do not use journalism to promote it. That's not. And they say, well, what are the issues you care about? And I'm like, none of your business, really. That's not, it's not a thing. But they're all looking to journalism as a way to push an agenda, which worries me a lot about this younger generation coming up, and it concerns me because they will find a place in our fractured sort of news media landscape. They will find a place to push an agenda, but I think it's a terrible trend in journalism.
Great
and
answer.
I will say, going back to your point about my embodiment of confidence in the workplace.
Yeah, by the way, I muddled through that and feel shitty about how I verbalized it. I wish I could have done a better job.
No, are you kidding? That's one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I just wish I could have been more specific about what I meant, I guess.
No, I get what you mean. A lot of that goes back to when I was a city hall reporter in Houston, Texas, and I was doing these series of stories about public housing. And I actually called the mayor a liar on the front page of the paper. And this was the biggest paper in the state, 500,000 daily readers, and I called the mayor a liar on the front page, and I stood by it and I owned it. And the mayor was furious, screaming to the paper in his motorcade to meet with the publisher and throw a fit. And my mentor, who was an older man, came over to me and nudged me and said, "Way to slap the suits around. Nice." And I was like, yes. And I thought, that's how I always want to feel. I want to feel like I did something right. I called someone out, and I am ready to slap the suits around. And that just made me feel good. And when I think about that, and I think about, for example, Liz Cheney. She's someone who slaps the suits around too. She doesn't care. She'll take anyone out. And she is like truthful and sort of righteous. And it's kind of fun to watch.
Well, that's what I was going to say about you. I love to watch you. I loved it. I watched you move through space. We didn't work, in the same space a lot, but whenever I was around you, I really observed your behavior. And then I observed the behavior of other people reacting to it. And and I honestly do think I think about you when I think about my daughters. I'm like, I hope that my daughters are able to kind of, behave similarly. Not that it's my choice or whatever they want, but I've always admired that about you and hope that there's not a lot of women that are necessarily on air positions even. And those that are, it's like, I feel so bad for them because they don't have a lot of role models. And I just always saw you as someone who was that person. And I think it's a tribute to your previous work too. As you just said, you're not going to, I think I share that to some extent, not the gender thing, but going from stand-up comedy into corporate media, I was like, I don't give a shit. Are you serious right now? Do you know what I've done? Do you know where I've been? That's you.
Thank you. That's a wonderful thing to say to me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You tell me whenever you want to come on. I would talk to you every day. Who would you talk to if you could get them to join you every day? Maybe that's not a great question, but you talk to so many good, let's say, reporters and journalists. Who's someone that you really always look forward to talking to on your show?
Maureen Dowd is always really funny, and Dana Milbank is hilarious. But, my show now is more like politicians and stuff. And I've been trying to get George W. Bush. He's out of it. He just does not want to do it. But, there's been all these things that sort of percolate, and it would almost be great to have him as the color man, and he could just use whatever profanity he wanted. He could chuckle and say anything. Yeah. And his commentary, I think, would be hilarious.
Yeah, he would never do that. He would be if he were, to be honest, and transparent about his personality, but I bet you he wouldn't. He just
you remember his comment after Trump's inauguration. He turned to Hillary Clinton and said, that was some weird shit.
I love talking to you. That'd be hell. I live for the day that you interview that guy. And Julie, thank you for letting me interview you today and talking to you. And I hope to see you and talk to you real soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pete.
All right. There you go. What do you say? Julie Mason. Check her out on SiriusXM if you're a subscriber there on the morning show, 6 to 9 a.m. Mason Mornings. It's Julie Mason on Twitter. And I hope that you will let her know that you heard her here and that you appreciate it and enjoyed having her join our conversation. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope that you have an awesome weekend. If you're listening on Friday, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support. Of course. And if you haven't signed up for a subscription, now would be a great time. I'd love to see you come in over the weekend. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I'll pop you an email if you sign up now. If we've never talked and you're a subscriber and you'd love to, let me know. I got time. The girls are away. I'll give you a call. Let's set it up. Hit me up, standupwithpete@gmail.com. I love making new friends in this community, connecting people with each other. And no, you're not ever alone if you're a member of the Stand Up with Pete Dominic community. The Discord chat is always open. People are always in there chatting, supporting each other, sharing ideas and experiences and advice on all kinds of things. Just a great, great community, and I'm so proud to be a part of it with you. All right, that's it. John Carroll, who is a very valued member of that community, he wrote this song, You Gotta Stand Up. It's available right now. You should go buy it. And I am going to let him, as he does every day, sing us out. Take it away, Johnny.
Stand our ground, and then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand